welcome back to the channel. I am coming today to give you a run through on a bit of color theory and walk you through how I pick different gray pencils and when I know what gray pencils to use and so on and so forth. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background first on colors, and I'm also going to go into a little bit of color theory for you because I feel like some of it is going to really be helpful. Now, I'm not going to bring out my color wheel in this video because we are talking about grays, but I have got a couple of coloring books aside, and I will show you examples in my coloring where I've used different grays and why I've used them. But I've left this page open for you to have a look at something pretty while I'm just going to waffle and talk on. And then I will point out a few things on this page as far as the grays are concerned. And if you are wondering what book this is, it's in Mythographic Paradise by Fabiano Attanasio. So when I was in my mid-teens, my one gran, she sat down with me and we had gotten talking about color and makeup and all that sort of things, and how a woman would, or even a man, would dress certain shades of color to suit their skin tone or their complexion. And she ended up giving me to read a lovely book all on different skin types and how to tell what kind of clothes and color of clothes would suit which kind of skin, and the same with makeup and that sort of thing. And what I learned from that book was that there are two main undertones in human skin, but I'm also going to take that concept and I'm going to show you how it relates to just about everything in life. And when we can actually see it and understand that there are undertones, then we can start looking at our pictures and thinking, okay, well, I want my picture to feel warm, I want my picture to feel cool, I want to have more of a subtle feel to it, and what kind of feel I want to bring to my coloring page. And it's really, whether it's fashion, whether it's beauty or coloring or whatever, it really comes down to the same basic principles. So in human skin tone, you have a blue undertone or you have a yellow undertone. Now, if you were to go and look even at people of darker skin tones like African people or people with an olive skin tone, their skin tone can, especially the more Mediterranean, they tend to have a more yellow undertone to their skin than, say, a blue undertone. So even in Caucasian or white skin tone, you can have a blue undertone or a yellow undertone. And the way we do that is really by looking at what clothes suit us best. Now, for instance, generally speaking, you can have a person with brown hair, and I'm not talking about dyed hair, I'm talking about natural hair color. And if you, like, I have naturally brown hair, but I've got a warm reddish undertone, so my skin tone is actually got more of a yellow undertone to it than a blue undertone. And my grandmother, she has a more blue undertone to her skin, and so she would wear pale pinks, pale blues, grays, whereas I would have to wear oranges, reds, greens. I have to be very careful with the types of yellows I wear. And I'm going to show you my swatch book and explain this more in detail so you can really get a feel for what I'm talking about. So this is my Prismacolor swatch book, and yes, the same principles apply no matter what brand of pencils you have. So if you don't like Prismacolors, don't worry, the tips are pretty much the same. If you have a look at these browns here, these are burnt ochre, chocolate, sienna brown, terracotta. They have a red and a warm undertone to them. If you compare them to, say, the blues on this side. Now, blues are generally up to about here. They generally are considered your cool colors. Okay, in your color wheel, you have your primary colors are red, yellow, and blue. So blue is generally a cold undertone. And then here you've got, excuse me, here you've got warm colors. So these would have reds, red undertones here. This is getting more of your browns with a slight yellow undertone here. If you were to look at yellow chartreuse or lime peel, they have yellow, a dominating yellow undertone to them with with green added to it. So that's why they're very bright and almost yellowish. If you come to green ochre has still got that yellow undertone, but it is going a bit more into a deeper green and maybe slightly a bit of brown. Okay, if you come down here to this dark green, this has got a blue undertone because it doesn't have much warmth to it. If you compare it to, say, the lime peel, there's no feeling of warmth. If I look at the celadon green, the jade green, the muted turquoise, again, those have blue undertones, so they're not going to give that warm feeling. But my sandbar brown has still got a yellow undertone to it. Okay, now this is based on my understanding of color and how I interpret color. Let me show you in your reds. All right, so here you have your yellows and you have your reds. Now, yellows and reds are, generally speaking, warm colors, okay? But up until my pinks. So here you've got warm green, oranges, warm reds. Poppy red is quite warm. Carmine red is still got warm. It's got that warm feeling to it. It's still got mixed with yellow, which gives it that vibrancy. It's got more of that orange. Permanent red is still warm. Scarlet Lake, crimson red. But when I start coming to crimson lake, I've got that yellow undertone, but I'm starting to lose it because of it's moving closer to actual red and into that red mixed with blue. Now, if I look at magenta, processed red, mulberry, hot pink, although they, from the red section, and they're still giving a bit of a warmish feel, they're starting to get a bit cooler. And that's because the amount of yellow and red in them is starting to reduce. By the time I get to purple, I've actually got red here mixed in with a lot more blue. So Imperial Violet is a bluey purple. Violet is blue, it's got a blue undertone to it. Dioxazine Purple Hue has got a lot of blue. By the time I've got to Black Grape, it's like a purpley black. So very few of my purples are going to have the same warmth to them as my oranges and my reds. So how does this compare to the grays? Well, gray is really going from black and being diluted with like white. So it's moving away from pure black closer to white. So it's the varying thing on the spectrum. Now, if I look at my grays, for the most part, they're actually quite cool. But my French grays, they have a little bit more of like a brown feel to them. They are a little bit warmer for me personally than if I look at all these grays here. Now notice here, these cool grays have actually got much more blue in them. They're a much bluer undertone than, say, my warm grays. And my French greys are actually much more, I would say they're the warmest as far as the undertones. They have a more yellowy kind of undertone to them. So when I'm picking a picture, if I want my moon to look nice and cool and vibrant and bright, I'm going to use my cool grays, because if I come here into my French grays, I'm going to have too much of this yellowy feel to it, like, and this French gray is similar to the putty beige up here. It's got a similar feel, and I don't see that in the moon. So I would stick to my cool grays. I could jump into my warm grays if I needed to, and I could still get away with it, but I find, generally speaking, the cool grays, they blend and transition beautifully together. If I add a slate gray, which you can see is actually gray mixed with blue, it will complement these cool grays because they both have a bit of a blue undertone to them. So let me show you some examples. Here in this picture, I'm just going to zoom you out a bit. Here in this picture, I have a mixture of colors. I have blue, I have green, and I have yellow. So the yellow and orange are warm, and they're contrasting with the blue. In the color wheel, blue and green are analogous, but my browns and my oranges and my yellows are analogous, but yet they will contrast each other, and that's why I've used them together. But when it comes to my grays, I can't go and use, on the swans, I could use any of the grays. I could have used French gray, because swans, when they're in the water, some of their feathers are going to get a bit dirty, so they would have a bit of that browny look to them. But for the balance of the page, because I was wanting a predominantly cool blue kind of feel, I went for the cool grays. My moon, I don't want any of those French grays or warmer grays. I wanted them to really stand out and kind of have a bluey feel. So it's going quite white and sharp and that sort of thing. So I used cool grays for all the white on this page. But now I'm going to show you a different picture. Now when it comes to snow in coloring, I've got 2 pages here of snow. I use cool grays and I use slate gray because I want that blue to really add dimension, but I'm using the darker cool grays to add shadow. I don't want to use black, so instead of using black, I will use warm gray 90%. I will use cool gray 90%. I can use those almost interchangeably, and as long as I go over it with a different color, like a slate gray in my snow, or a different shade of gray, it will be fine, because I will mute down the darkness. But if I use black, I risk flattening my shape, and I don't want that. So here I've used slate gray, I've used some cool gray 70%, some cool gray 90% for shadow, and then I've used regular blues, purples for warmth, and the yellow I used just to draw the eye to the snow. Now, if you wanted to create dirty snow, you could then go into your French grays, a bit of your browns, and it would work. I haven't seen dirty snow. I like to keep my pictures really kind of picturesque and that ideal snow look. Here in this snow, I followed a tutorial by Helen Elliston in one of her special color effects book, and she uses a lot of the cool grays to create snow, whereas I use a bit of purple. So going based on other people who are much more experienced than me, I've learned that cool grays and blues work really well together. However, if I wanted to deepen up my leaves, for example, I could easily go into a French grey because it's a bit closer to brown than any of the other warm greys, and it will help to add depth and dimension. When it comes to warm grey versus cool grey, it's a bit more tricky. I think it just depends on how you swatch it, and I really do recommend, where possible, test out your color combinations on a scrap piece of paper to make sure that you are getting the color that you want. It is a habit I believe everyone should be doing. It's something I am actually pressurizing myself to do more of because it really helps. Now, here on this black metal part of the birdhouse, I would have used some cool grays, and I would have used some white pencils to create the highlights. Now, I could also get away with a warm gray 30%, but again, I would test it to see if that's what I wanted. If it didn't give me that sharp contrast, then I would go for a cool gray and work to getting that contrast to draw attention and create that highlight. So when it comes to the warm gray or the cool gray, it really depends on the effect that you're after. Are you looking, will it work with the colors you are wanting to use it with? If not, try the cool gray. And with time and experimenting, you'll figure out which ones work for you. But yeah, as a general rule, I tend to use French grays to deepen up my leaves, or I use indigo blue. If I don't use that, then I try use darker greens. But to get deeper shadows, I tend to use French grays or cool gray 90%, or even blue. If I'm doing snow, clouds, moons, I will stick to my cool grays. At the moment, that seems to be working for me. I seem to understand those, and with time and practice, we'll get more used to doing our grays. But now, if I show you in Fragile World, I'm busy filming the rock hopper penguins. And when I get to coloring the penguins, I will most likely use a mixture of warm grays and cool grays, because I will use my reference photo and I will see what is more natural and accurate to the animal. If it will most likely end up being a warm gray because I have a lot of browns here. The browns I'm using will add warmth. I've also got yellow, so I most likely would step into warm grays or French grays to create the fur. I don't want to do that right now on this video to show you, because I'd like to keep this color along series dedicated and separate. So again, here where the arm is, I would use most likely my 70% French gray, possibly if I really want to go darker, 90% warm gray, and I would do it from there and build it up. So that is sort of how I think when it comes to grays and pulling out grays. Now, when it comes to clothing, I have a few pictures I can show you and explain to you how you would use grays to create white clothing. So I'm just going to clear these books away from my desk so I have a bit more space. And I have two books. One is in Gods and Goddesses, and the other one is in Goddesses. So let's start with Goddesses by Marty Noble. And in here, I did this beautiful lady, and I used different grays to create the white dress. Now, I used French grays here. And if you look closely at it, if I bring it up, you can see that it's, even though it's gray, it's actually got a bit of a brownish look to it. So I have to be very careful when I use French grays to create white clothing, because if I use too much, the clothing is actually going to stop looking white and it's going to start looking a bit dirty. And that is where I want to be very careful with my French grays, using it as an accent to show that it's not necessarily clean, and that it's got a bit of character to it. I can use the French grays, but I possibly could have gotten a bit more of a deeper effect between all the pleats of the clothing if I had used a bit more cool grays. So I'll show you a better example now in Gods and Goddesses, which is in the Coloring Heaven. And in this page, so here I use polychromos pencils, and up here around the buckle of her armor, I used a very, I think it was 70% or 90% French gray. And here you can see it works. I have still maintained the whiteness of the clothing, but I've also used a bit of cool grays and blues just to reflect the background a bit. All right, now I used a reference photo to do this, and I had to be very sparing with the amount of grays I used to make sure I didn't change the clothing from white into a light brown. Now if I'd used 10% French gray or 20% French gray and I used too much of it, it would not look white, it would look more gray, as in this next example. So this next example I'm going to show you is also in a Coloring Heaven book. It's their steampunk special, and it's this first book. So with this little boy, I wanted to go for a white shirt, but I used far too much French gray and far too much yellow, and ended up creating a more off-white kind of shirt than a white shirt. If you contrast it to the I put them together, okay, here you can see the difference. So this is much whiter than this. Now this was my first attempt at white clothing, so here you can see how being careful with the amounts of French or warm grays can actually create a different effect to a white. Now white is by nature much cooler than, say, a cream. So here, to create the white, yes, I can use the French gray, but I also have to use some of the cool grays and build up the layers that way, so it stays cool and not changes and becomes warm. Now this has a much more of that yellow undertone, where this has got more of that blue undertone I was talking about. So I hope this has helped you a little bit more to understand how I pick the different grays that I do and why I pick them. I hope that this is also helpful to you in understanding grays and how they can work with other things. Do let me know in the comments below if this has been helpful or insightful. If there are any other things with colors that you are struggling with or would like to understand more of, please do let me know in the comments, and I will happily make a video to explain it to you as best as I can. In the meantime, carry on watching all the YouTube videos that you do watch and the channels you do watch. Keep learning from artists and people with loads of experience. And also I really want to encourage you, just keep coloring, keep practicing, and over time you will get to where you want to go. And don't beat yourself up if you haven't gotten to where you'd like to be yet, or it's not clicking for you. I promise you that the more you color in, the more consistent you are, you will get there. Enjoy coloring. It's a beautiful hobby. It's an expression of who you are and of your own creativity, and what you color in is beautiful and a delight to see. So be encouraged, and I will see you all in the next video. Take care everyone, and happy coloring.